The all-round digital transformation makes every company a software company, which relies on a multitude of third-party vendors, thus adding to a difficult-to-manage third-party risk. The services contain code, and code always has vulnerabilities, which put the interconnected users, industries, societies, countries at risk. Will there be a global policy response to address that risk? Is fixing our common cyber vulnerability even possible at all? Imagine we're living in a town that is hit by a cyber attack. Particularly, the energy grid in our town is attacked. And also, imagine we're living in an ideal world where the cyber attack has been mitigated very quickly. Hard to believe? Well, let's watch it right now.
A massive power outage has hit southern Klimbondia. At 9:23, everything went dark. It is still unclear what caused the outage. A government spokesperson says, "We are investigating." We now hear that the power outage is also affecting neighbor states.
I had just started my first cup of coffee when random systems went offline. It was clear something weird was going on. All we knew was we were hit by ransomware. They had encrypted our systems and asked for a hefty payment to release them. What we didn't know at that moment was how far it had spread, but we could see it minutes later on the news.
The energy minister of Vulcania has just joined his colleagues from Republia and Fredonia and expressed his severe concerns about the power outage that seems to be affecting the whole network of Enea Klimbondia. An Enea Klimbondia spokesperson told us they were aware of the problems and working with the government to quickly remediate the situation.
We brought in our cybersecurity provider and they quite quickly noticed this was a much bigger thing than just some ransomware. Obviously, we were attacked by another state. They then also reached out to the company whose operating systems ran all across our infrastructure.
This is a difficult situation. Critical infrastructure is under attack by a sophisticated actor. The software is from a foreign country, and you have to get everyone on a table to find a solution, as it is a question of both national and global security. In an ideal world, you'd reach out to a national cybersecurity point of contact, most likely associated with the Ministry of Interior. They connect the attacked company with the software manufacturer, a cybersecurity company, and the cyber emergency response teams in the attacked country in the country of the software manufacturer. As they organized cyber exercises before and joint trainings, they quickly exchange information on the threat, analyze and compare forensic samples, and if you are lucky, you find a way out.
I thought we were screwed, but they kicked off a response scenario through the government. The funny thing is, whoever built that attack against us was lazy. They reused some buggy code from an older campaign, and that allowed us to get the systems back up.
After 12 hours of insecurity and anxiety, people in southern Klimbondia and neighboring countries returned to normal. A government spokesperson said that a concerted effort between cyber emergency response teams, governments, and software companies made the quick resolution of the outage possible. We believe this was an attack by another nation on our infrastructure. The government will keep investigating and will decide about countermeasures in due course.
So let's go back to the reality where we don't have this scenario, at least right now. This is the RSA conference, and our panel discussion is titled today, "The Ticking Cyber Bomb. Is there a global policy response to fix value chain risks?" My name is Anastasia Kazakova. I'm a Senior Public Affairs Manager at Kaspersky, coordinated global cyber diplomacy projects and our Global Transparency Initiative, the company's program to enhance accountability and transparency in cybersecurity. I'm happy to introduce our experts today. Jon van Zoon, Special Envoy for Cyber, Foreign and Security Policy at the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. Jon and his colleagues are organizers of the Geneva Dialogue, an international conversation on responsible behavior in cyberspace. And last year, particularly, Geneva Dialogue gathered industry partners to discuss security of digital products, including mitigating vulnerabilities. Then also we have Greg Jones, Director of Cybercrime at Interpol, to share an operational global perspective as well as enforcement on how internationally law enforcement professionals cooperate, and work together. And finally, we have honor with us today also Serge Drost, the chair of the board of directors at FIRST, Forum for Incident Response and Security Teams, the premier organization of recognized global leaders in incident response. Serge actively participates in discussions on cybersecurity at various policy bodies, in particular related to norm building. On the screen, you may also see our Twitter accounts. They are for comments if you like to tag us. As for the questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. We would be happy to interact with you afterwards and share our answers in a written form. So starting right now, our panel focuses on two key blocks. First, we will discuss threats, existing good practices to address them, and the challenges to develop a global policy response. Then our key question will be what possible ingredients of a global policy response might be. Though we focus on the value chains, which following the OECD definition implying concepts similar to the concept of supply chains, it however focuses on the particular actors and the roles in developing digital products and ensuring the security. Today, we will combine both concepts, value chain and supply chains, as believe they are both important for developing a global policy response. Kaspersky researchers have been tracking several threat groups that focus on a highly targeted supply chain attacks, a key recent trend in the modus operandi. And you know what? The threat actors have gone on a dangerous path, targeting and exploiting vulnerabilities in the update and build system for software. Users who are always asked to install patches might get backdoors into their devices. And while you can be a target in this operation, you may also be a weapon too. What other threats we might see? What are the operational, technical, and policy challenges to address them? And I'm happy to pass the floor first to Director Jones to share his opinion too.
Thank you very much. And I'm saying it's a real honor to be here at this conference today. So I'm the director of cybercrime for Interpol, and I run a global program for 194 member countries. And that's looking to coordinate the efforts of law enforcement globally to combat cybercrime. Now, the mandate we have is to reduce the global impact of cybercrime and protect communities for a safer world. So I think everything we've seen so far comes back to what's the policing purpose? We are looking to protect life and property, but we now live in this massively interconnected society, and policing normally works in a local or regional NASTRI boundary, whereas now we're having to work, be connected through 194 countries, investigating massive types of incidents and crimes that occur. And what we have to understand is what are those vulnerabilities? What are those weakest links? Because that one small weak link can lead to a cyber crime or a cyber attack effectively. And also, police are not the first responders now. So when an attack happens, the people don't dial 991, 911 or 999 for the police to come and attend. They go through their IT departments, or they phone up a first responder who has that experience and comes in. So the initial response is by someone else that isn't the police, the ambulance, or the fire brigade. And for us in police, that's sometimes difficult for us to comprehend because our role is as a first responder, and we do come out, we secure the scene, we gather the evidence, but we're not in there at that first moment in time. Now that moves us into another stage then, is when police are, and it is reported to police, cybercrime is underreported, and it's very difficult for me to sit here and start giving you some global figures around the amount of crimes that have been reported, because some countries don't even record that as a cybercrime, or what is a cybercrime. And then how do we bring all those data together and aggregate that globally? So again, that's one of the challenges that we're looking at on our cybercrime program. So when we look at how we can deal with this and some of the good practice, this is about building that trust between law enforcement. It's building it on a national basis, a regional basis, and a global basis. Within our cybercrime program, we just look at crime. So that's non-state actors, organized crime groups. But when we look at the vulnerabilities, any threat actor can take advantage of those vulnerabilities. And that then comes into that important role that policing has, is to prevent crime. So a different approach is how we can work with private partners, with certs, to identify those vulnerabilities, make people aware of those vulnerabilities, and then plug them. And coming back just finally to the mandate of our program, is to reduce the global impact of cybercrime. So as we started on this at the beginning, we talked about, can we actually stop cybercrime? And I think for all of us, it's about the people, the process, and the technology, and looking at all those different areas and trying to identify the vulnerabilities in there, and then get people to take care where they go online, but also coming on to the different sort of protection that you can have, which is the technical side. So I think that's just for me as an opener, and I'll hand it back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Jones. I really like the point that police is probably the first to contact if something happens in a computer, but the police is not the one who actually might help. And I wonder how many really people call the police if something happened in the computer. I remember some polls that people mostly prefer to search in a Google or call some trusted friend instead of police. You also touched on a really important notion of trust, and I'm right now really glad that we have Serge to speak a little bit more about the role, how incident respondents see this picture too. So Serge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anastasia, and thanks for having me here. My name is Serge Dross. I'm the chair of the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. It's an umbrella organization that brings together the cyber first responders. We are the teams that are on the ground, kind of the firefighters when something really happens. Most of our members are either from large tech companies or from governments. And we currently have something over 500 members, which may sound like a lot, but actually it's just a drop in the bucket because there's many more companies that are affected. Now, Craig was talking about supply chains and how important this is, and the topic of today is really value chains. I think one of the big challenges is that these value chains, they're totally global. They're like the internet, do not respond any geographical borders. And it just takes a ship to run aground to stop the world economy. And the same is true in cyberspace. Actually, a lot of the big underground fibers that connect the east to the west run through the very Suez Canal that was blocked. So it wouldn't have taken a lot for that ship to take out a lot of these connections. And for us, it's really hard to understand where are these kind of weakest links. When we think of weakest links in a supply chain, a cyber supply chain, we always think of these high-tech outfits, but it may be something super simple. If you talk about pharmacy, it may be a little shop that produces glass flasks to transport vaccinations. If that's gone, and that's super low-tech, the whole thing stops. So the big companies, they're all kind of in the game. We know how to work together, but we miss so much. We miss many of the operators of the crucial small things that we tend to forget. I think that's one of the big challenges. Now, when I say that the big companies, the big organizations, they're in and they work together, what does that actually mean? Well, it means that their security teams collaborate, even though their companies or their employers may be competitors. Sometimes people are quite astonished how openly we work together, how openly I start talking to security teams from competing companies. But the reason for that is a simple one. We all have the same enemy, cyber criminals and other miscreants who make our lives difficult. But the way we work may sound really great and everybody talks about information sharing, but it is actually quite hard. Craig mentioned it needs trust, and building trust is a hard thing. It means we need to meet, we need to meet in person. Trust is an inherently human thing, and we tend to forget that. You cannot create trust between computers. That just is an absurd notion. The trust is between maybe the system administrators of the computers, who then kind of extend their computers to represent that trust or something. But it's a human thing. And the question now then becomes how you start building trust. And that's where FIRST comes into the game. We try to build a platform where we bring these people together so they can start talking, they can start building up trust. But what we also see is that in an increasingly polar political climate, building up trust across borders, across nations or political blocs becomes increasingly harder. Yet our economies are entangled. And cyber criminals love justice. It's the old divide and conquer. And that's what cyber criminals really, really know. And I think one of the biggest challenges much bigger than all the technical challenges that we have, is really how can we get the people to work efficiently? That's the security teams, that's the technical engineers that make the internet run, but it's also security teams and law enforcement. How can we work together? How can we work better together? What are our roles? These are all kind of big questions. They're not really super new questions, but they're still unanswered. But on the good side, security teams continue working. We have a lot of security teams that, especially during these COVID times, have been working together relentlessly to help health organizations to protect against cybercrimes. I'm also really happy to say that we're working together with Interpol on coming up with best practices to bring together law enforcement and cybersecurity specialists so that we start to learn each other's understanding and each other's issues and each other's language, because that's what's really needed when we want to work together efficiently. Back to you, Anastasia.
Thank you very much, Serge. I had a question about if the Interpol and FIRST cooperate, and you already answered on that. Yeah. But if you'd like to probably share a little bit more details, any particular examples where the success actually happened because of the close cooperation between police and law enforcement and incident respondents?
Let me jump in. So FIRST and Interpol are building what we call a special interest group, of which FIRST has many, that actually focuses on exactly this kind of collaboration where we try to come up with best practices for both sides, for all involved parties, what police officers need to know, what do security people need to know, so that this conversation is going to be a successful one. Because let's not forget, the police is not the same as the firefighters. Yeah. And that's the same in incident response. And it's important that all the people and all the involved parties understand that. We also try to make sure that all our events, we regularly have people from law enforcement present, talking about their sides. It is still a getting to know each other much better phase, and I think there's still a lot of room to do. So sadly, I think, Craig, you and me, we still have a lot to do. And that's my take on it. Maybe you want to elaborate too.
Absolutely. I'm building out on that point. Part of what we're focusing on at the moment, who does Interpol, who does law enforcement need to partner with? Now, in national constructs within countries, there's some very, very good interactions between law enforcement and also the CERTs, National Cybersecurity Centres, cybersecurity agencies, where they have clear incident handling rules when an incident comes in about who takes the incident to start with, who manages it, who takes the lead. So it's understanding those roles and remits. But one of our private partners who's just come on board, a Shadow Server, and we're doing a piece of work with them at the moment with 2 national CERTs in 2 different countries, one in Europe and one in Asia. And what we're doing there is supplying them with information where service providers in the countries have the most exposed systems. Now, that's probably normally a sort of critical national infrastructure, a CERT angle that they're looking at. We're trying to add value to that, but also trying to work out where does police add value, because in some countries, the CERTs are very small. They don't have capacity or capabilities. So again, working with FIRST, we're looking at identifying those countries, then how can we support them, what models? And again, it comes back to what's best practice as well. So how can we demonstrate what the best practice is? And it comes back to protecting communities. And that's what we're all trying to do at the end of the day.
Thank you. I guess that one of the really key challenges that we all agree on is the lack of capacity sometimes. And so it's definitely one of those that really lack capacities to address the challenges. But coming back to the notion of trust, there's definitely probably the trust to people, but also to trust to the products we use. This is something that I mentioned in the beginning, and I'd like to pass the floor right now to Jon, because Geneva Dialect is one of the probably bright examples how to ensure trust in modern digital products.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm the special envoy for cyber foreign security policy in the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our office is responsible for the strategic and operational management and design of Switzerland's cyber foreign and security policy. And we also run, as you mentioned, the Geneva Dialogue. But for your question, we talked a lot about trust. And I think what we ultimately need to boost cooperation and global response is greater trust. It was mentioned before. And I think it's trust between states, trust between states and the private sector, but also trust between civil society, private sector, and this triangle also with states. In the international relations, why it is so hard to develop more trust? I think what we are missing at the international level is a shared vision among the global powers. We see many divisions about the nature of the internet, about how human rights should be protected, how new technologies should be governed, if at all, about the treatment of personal data by law enforcement and industry. Some of those divisions, like also the data protection, are not only among the main competitors, but also among allies. This lack of vision among states has repercussions also on the private sector, in my view. How can we advance in this context? Let me make some points. First, I think we need the willingness to work together on the basis of consensus and to reach compromise on how exactly international law applies in cyberspace, how human rights should be protected, how norms of responsible state behavior should be implemented. One example that consensus is still possible is the report of the open-ended working group on cyber ICT security in the framework of the first committee of the UN. Under the leadership of the Swiss ambassador Jürg Glauber, it was possible to reach consensus to have a report. I think it's a great diplomatic effort and success due also to the member states and also other actors that contribute to that process. It was possible to reaffirm important issues such as the applicability of the UN Charter. Going forward, I think we need to ensure that the new Cybercrime Convention within the United Nations will not undermine existing standards set by the Council of Europe. It's the Budapest Convention. And in our view, it's also important that this framework work is based on consensus. I just want to mention a few other points. And a second way of increasing trust in our view is confidence building. On a regional level, the OSCE have agreed on the 60 confidence building measures. They can and should be used by participating states to increase transparency and exchange information. Third, we also need more engagement between major powers to come to agreements. Switzerland, as a neutral country, is ready to host and is ready with Geneva to host if there is a possibility for such agreements. A fourth element, to build trust, we also need to implement what we agreed on. Only if we show time and time again that we comply with what we agreed, we can build confidence and trust. And last point, I think it's very important for the implementation that we involve stakeholders. The technical community represented by SERCH, sorry, in our conversation today, and the private sector are far more resourceful than states when it comes to addressing digital security flaws. What is more, those stakeholders are strongly networked globally, as you mentioned, which makes it easier to achieve consensus at this level. So with that, back to you.
Thank you so much. What I heard, at least the ingredients of the successful global policy response might be the confidence building measures, increase the capacities for those parties that are involved addressing those risks. But I also like the notes that both Director Johnson and Serge noted about the legal barriers or the policy barriers. Would you like to provide more reflections on that? How is there any way to fix this? Maybe Director Jones, starting with you first.
So that's a really good question. One area we're particularly working at the moment is on our global program is what is that response of law enforcement? How do we cooperate and collaborate? Because each nation has its own laws, its own jurisdictions effectively. I think if you look at the EU model with Europol and EC3, how they've combined a number of countries together, they have common frameworks that they can work to. Where we're looking at how Interpol can then work in that space is as that neutral organisation, bringing those countries that maybe would not have that face-to-face dialogue, that would not look to speak at times around certain issues. So as, again, a bit like Switzerland, we're a neutral organisation. So we just recently had an operation with the FBI in the US, where we looked at a stolen credit cards forum called Joker Stash. We worked directly with Russia on that. Now, we were able to bring those countries together. And that, for me, is a really important space where I see Interpol can act in a proactive manner, identifying the threats, the risks, and the high harm that's being caused, and then start bringing those countries together where either the threat actors are, or whether the infrastructure is, or whether the victims are, and look to see how we can then disrupt. So we may not always have a judicial outcome. I know particularly in the UK, we were measured, one of our measurements on cybercrime was how many cyber criminals did we arrest in the UK? Well, the attackers are global. So to have a metric in a national environment, just measuring one small element, again, it's quite difficult then for police to show our value add. So when we're going back and saying, well, this is what we've achieved, because we need to be able to do that to show that we're prioritising the cybercrime, we're going after the criminals, and we have results. That's what we actually need to amplify out for a regional and global model as well. So I think that sort of covers most parts of the question you've just asked there.
Yeah, I'm totally agree. And I think it's really more easy to do within the sort of group of like-minded countries, or the countries which have a shared vision, as Jon highlighted. But making it more scalable, is it possible at all? Serge, what do you think?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a very hard question. I think at the end of the day, it's a decision that states have to face it or to take if they really want to tackle this problem or not. I'm kind of mildly optimistic in the sense that we kind of can live with a certain level of cybercrime, but if it becomes too much, it just becomes too painful, and then states will start reacting. So the question is just, how long do we wait? And I do have my hopes that we're gonna get better here, but there is still a lot of work to be done. And I think, I mean, you mentioned this, it's often like-minded organizations to not only talk about states that work together, but even here we actually have a regulatory or policy challenges. Often there's a liability issue, and very frequently we all sitting around the table, or I guess in front of our webcams, and we each know the other side knows something that would help me or the other guy a lot, but we can't really tell it because kind of the legal compliance guy on the side outside the camera is standing there and saying, no, you're not going to tell this. And I think that is a way where we need to make progress so that security teams or the good guys, to say it simply, can actually get their work done. I think there is some progress. If you look at the European NIS directive, the version 2, that actually starts recognizing that security teams don't violate privacy. They actually make sure that privacy becomes better so that information that's stolen doesn't end up in the hands of criminals. These are things we need to work on. Another topic that sometimes makes our lives really, really hard is badly implemented sanctions. And there's some security teams not even allowed to talk to. And that's a problem in the global cyber supply chain. So these are a couple of things that I think need to be addressed. And then something that I think is also relevant for law enforcement is the problem of jurisdictions. A lot of cybercrime that I meet in my day job actually happens on our servers, which are in Switzerland, but the criminals and the victims are both outside Switzerland. So who should I go to? everybody tells me I'm not responsible for it. And that is totally okay. The Swiss police is not responsible for an armed robbery on a German bank, but maybe it should be responsible for cybercrime that passes through Swiss territory, even if it's only through a fiber. I think that's one of the big challenges too. And I think we're on the way to go there. It'll probably take us some more years, but we'll see.
Great that you actually shared so much optimism. It's actually quite inspirational. But I agree that probably most of the challenges on the policy side rather than on the technical side, and also hear from my colleagues, security researchers, that I actually don't really have the problems to cooperate with other companies, with other organizations to share the information. The barrier is indeed the sort of new borders in cyberspace. And from that, Jon, probably you'd like to share a little bit more. You also mentioned on the UN level, the recent OIWG report, and I guess UN level is the only one level where all states have the means to cooperate with each other to discuss this topic, or maybe I'm wrong. So what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. You ask if collaboration and cooperation is possible. I think yes, the Open-Ended Working Group, as you mentioned, is an example that consensus is possible. But on the other hand, I think it also shows a little bit the limits of cooperation and what is possible at the moment in this context. I think there are also possibilities to find common ground and to see where we can have confidence building measures on a level that doesn't need a lot of trust. I think we have to identify where it is possible to collaborate. And I also wanted to mention the Geneva dialogue as a complementary element to the discussions on a political level. The force of this dialogue is, among others, that it is global. It's not among like-minded. It's among the private sector, and they come from all continents, and that is, I think, the force of this dialogue. And it's a sort of bottom-up approach where the top-down approach, policy approach, is probably necessary, of course, but can't reach every angle of our problems.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. And I guess the time is almost up, so we must bring our panel discussion to a close, but let's finalize in the Twitter form. What do you believe one at least component is a key ingredient in building a global policy response? Just one. So Serge, what do you think?
Well, after this panel, it's so obvious. It's global collaboration across trust gaps, across any other gaps we may have. It's really collaboration.
Great. Director Jones?
It's cyber partnerships against crime. And I think when you look at how we're now operating with our private partners and being able to bring data in from private partners and share with private partners, again, I'm very optimistic. My glass is definitely half full.
Super, great. Thank you so much. And Jon, what do you think?
I agree completely. Cybersecurity is a team sport. We need everyone on his place and which each role to play to have a free, secure cyberspace.
Thank you. And I also would agree that cooperation is the core element, of course. I hope you find the discussion useful. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us and ask additional questions, which will be passed along to speakers. We will do our best to share answers shortly. Please also join me in thanking our great experts today who have shared their very frank and useful remarks. Thank you very much, Director Jones, Serge, and Jon. Thank you.